welcome. Thank you so much for attending our first Diversity in Tech event in Europe. I'm super excited to have you all here. And the theme for tonight is about diversity and allyship, or put a little bit more simply, how do we advocate better for our teammates? And this is a topic I'm super passionate about for a couple of reasons. One, because it hinges on the idea that we individually are all really diverse, and that actually sets us up to be perfect allies for our teammates, because we're a bunch of different things at once. For example, I'm a woman, and I'm an American, and I'm the head of diversity at Atlassian. And all of those identities give me a way to help somebody else. And so that's what we're going to start in talking about. But before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about inclusion. So inclusion sounds kind of like a fancy word, but what it really means is that someone feels like they belong and like they can show up authentically. And the opposite of inclusion is exclusion, something that I think we've all felt. So I would encourage you to take a moment right now and think of a moment in which you felt excluded. You felt like you didn't belong. Tapping into that, not super comfortable. But now, I want you to think of a moment in which someone made you feel included. Someone did something that made you feel like you were a part of the team, like you belonged where you were, and like you were there to do it together. That's the kind of feelings that we want to create for everyone on our teams, because we know that diverse and inclusive teams are more innovative, they're more happy, they're more creative, they're more logical. So with that, I'm super excited to welcome our amazing panel, who will be introducing themselves in just a second. Come on up. All right. So in lieu of me reading your professional bios, like I just did, I talked a little bit about a couple of the identities that I have. And I want to talk a little bit about what allyship can look like first. So one of my identities today is a panelist. And I was thinking about how could I demonstrate allyship? And what I realized was at tech conferences, it's kind of a jeans and t-shirts crowd, right? And for some women, they're just not jeans and t-shirts kind of people. But they don't often see people that resemble them when they come to tech conferences. So as any of my colleagues can tell you, I'm really a jeans and t-shirts kind of person. But today I actually chose to dress up a little bit because I think it's important, because I might do something tiny that someone who maybe didn't feel authentic or empowered to show up at a tech conference wearing high heels or wearing bright lipstick might say, oh, that's okay, I'm included here now. So that's what allyship can look like. But I want our panelists to take a second and tell me a little bit about your role, what you do, what's your relation to Atlassian. But then I'd love for you to tell me about one or two of your identities that are really important to you. And it can be anything that defines you. So let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you, Aubrey. My name is Darlene, and I am the community manager for EMEA and APAC at Atlassian. I'm originally from the US, but I work out of Amsterdam. I help to support our user groups and our overall Atlassian community and community champions. I also lead the Amsterdam chapter of Side by Side, which is Atlassian's initiative to celebrating diversity and encouraging inclusion globally. Would you like me to talk about my identities now? Well, obviously I'm an entertainer. I hope you guys will see that as we as we progress. I am African American. I am American. I'm a female. Yeah, I'm a fun person, I would say, is my identity.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Bijal. I'm an Atlassian coach, but also, Atlassian specialist and agile coach. I've been working in the Atlassian space for about 5 years now. It's a really sort of fun product, so really wanted to get involved. For me, I also run the Atlassian user groups in London, East Anglia, recently become co-leader in Edinburgh, and I've also set up Women Influence in Tech in London, and some of my recent work has included going to schools and local school fairs and talking to girls about what technology is, and enticing them, encouraging them, and hopefully encouraging them to do it at school or college. But yeah.
Great. Scott Farquhar. I started this thing a few years ago. I feel really privileged to be on this stage, actually. My Identities, I guess, is one of them is founder. Another one is father. I'm the father of 3 young boys. Another one for me, it's really key to my identity, is I grew up in a lower middle class upbringing, actually, and that I think influences a lot of the way I think about the world.
I'll take a little longer time, so if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm Shibi Purushothaman. As you can already gauge from my heavy accent, I am Indian by origin. I was born in the southern part of India, brought up in the northern part of India, so I'm a mix of both. And to add to complexity, I'm living in Germany since last few years. Now coming to my working situation, I'm working with Publicis.sapient as a consultant who leads a team of consultants who provide consulting services to delivery folks on our standard products, and that includes Atlassian products. Now coming to my identities, so in my personal life, I wear a hat of a daughter to my very kind and I'll say traditional yet open-minded parents. My father, he continues to work post his retirement, and my mom, she's differently abled, but she's a homemaker. And I wear a hat of a wife to a very supportive husband who actually opened me to these kind of sensitive topics such as gender, identity, or race, or societal structural inequality, all those kind, and many more actually. And he is the one who encouraged me to pledge to address those challenges head on. And I'm a foster mother to 2 beautiful sponsored children. So the younger one is age 5, Iqbal Khan. So he's a special child, and he'll be starting his schooling from this year. The elder one, Unesa, she's studying in 7th standard. Now coming to my professional side of business, so I am leading an amazing team that is distributed across America, Europe, and India. So I've been working with a lot of culture, and I can understand how it feels to work with different kind of people. I'm also an active member of Women Leadership Program that we have in our organization, and we support the professional development and networking of women at the leadership level. And I'm also working with hiring team. I am an interviewer who helps hiring team of our organization to hire diverse talent and eventually build a team which is more inclusive and diverse. So I personally feel each hat that I wear is significant and important to kind of contribute and make difference to society and build a society that's more humane and inclusive.
And it was so interesting, you touched on allyship sort of subtly and all of that, talking about your husband sort of being an advocate and showing you more perspectives and things like that, which is amazing. And then you, right, having these amazing foster children. But before we dig into some of the meatier stuff, I always got to go back to basics. And Scott, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm going to ask why you think diversity is important, and I'm pretty sure that you do because you hired me. But yeah, so talk to me about why creating diverse and inclusive teams is so important.
Firstly, teams are important. I mean, that's our stock ticker. It's everything you ever hear me talk about. And the reason you have teams is because you need to bring people together. If people all could do the same things, then we wouldn't need teams. So I guess diversity is key to, I guess, what we do. And teams need specialists, not only deep specialists in technical areas, but they need specialists in your customers. And the way, I guess when we started Atlassian, many of our customers were in technology, so that's largely white males. And as we've increasingly served people in all sorts of teams in an organization, we at Atlassian have had to go through this transition where our customer base now is very diverse, and we need to have that diversity of thought inside our organization.
Yeah. And Darlene, we talked about on a personal level, being on a diverse team. What does that mean, and why is it important?
Sure. So I would second what I would second what Scott said. Indeed, when you're appealing to a wide customer base and also suppliers, vendors, people that you're coming into contact with, it's great to have that diversity in thought, that diversity in approach. It makes you more innovative on your team. You feel like you're bringing value to it with your perspective while also respecting the diverse perspectives of the people on your team. For me personally, when I work on a diverse team, I feel more encouraged, I feel more supported, I feel more productive. I jump out of bed in the morning thinking, oh, I want to do my best today. I want to have a great day. I'm going to have a great day because I feel valued, and I know that my experience and the things that I bring to the table when it comes to the various identities and the hats that we wear will be appreciated.
Awesome. And now to go back a little bit to the exercise that we did earlier, Bijal, tell me about a time that you felt excluded, or like you didn't necessarily feel that inclusion that you really want to feel on a team.
Okay, so for me, I felt excluded in many scenarios, but I wanted to talk about my very first experience of feeling excluded, and this was when I was at university. I was one of 3 girls on the course. The 2 girls dropped out after 3 months because they didn't feel welcome, and they didn't like the balance. So yeah, for me, that was my very sort of first memory of feeling excluded. I often sat in class feeling like perhaps I shouldn't be there because I was the only female. And I tried very hard to include myself by participating as much as I could. But I felt when I was trying to participate, my voice wasn't really heard, and it was just, it wasn't heard at all. And I was constantly reminded on almost a daily basis that I was the only female in class, which was hard. I think for me, sometimes it's easier to blame that particular scenario or any scenario that you're in to gender, but I felt like that was gender related because it was explicitly mentioned. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
How many people were in that class?
There were 24 of us, and yeah, two dropped out, and so yeah, 1 girl.
So 23 and you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing. But I think the opportunity that those instances of exclusion give us is that we can actually take some pretty simple actions to include others. So it's just little tweaks to the things that we're doing every day. So Darlene, can you talk about a time that someone did something and it made you feel included, and what that was? What happened?
Yes, I can actually share an experience where it was an entire office. So how many of you just participated in Ship It Live? How awesome was that, right? So imagine how delighted we are as Atlassians. We run these internally every quarter. And in December of 2015, we had Ship It 33, and it was a major thing for us because we had just gone public. And the prize was that whoever won from each of our regional offices would be flown to Sydney to present to the office there and go for the grand prize. So in Amsterdam, my idea was to create a space where I highlighted contributions of women in tech as well as female Atlassians in the office. And I did not think I stood a chance at all in winning, and lo and behold, I did. Got on a flight the next day, went to Sydney, met Scott. I mean, it was just a complete whirlwind. So just to feel that it was an issue that was important to me and the entire office voted for it and supported it, it was just, I don't want to say validation because I know that these are very important topics that people feel very strongly about, but just feeling like the entire office got behind it and really, they were so excited that I got to go, and it was the best feeling.
Yeah.
It's something that will stay with me forever.
And you even broke some of the branding rules, right?
Oh yeah, so I put a wig on Charlie. Sorry. But yeah, it was really great.
Awesome. And Bijal, what about you? So you talked a little bit about exclusion, but what about a time that you felt included?
So I guess following on from my previous example, I started to very quickly feel like the 2 ladies that did leave, I felt quite alone and like I perhaps shouldn't be there. But also I didn't want to give up. So I talked to my teacher and we talked about ways to feel more included and how we could do that. So I started running some of the classroom sessions, which didn't last long, 10, 20 minutes. But what it meant was that my voice was being heard and had to be listened to. And that kind of worked for that period, but when I stopped talking and when that session stopped, it sort of went back to our previous example. So what we talked about then was that actually what we needed to do was perhaps build a relationship between me and the rest of my classmates. So we thought about doing some other fun activities, but actually what we needed to do is they needed to respect me and me being on that course. So the activity had to include that. So my teacher had an amazing idea of applying for something called Robot Wars in the UK, if anyone's heard of it. But essentially what we had to do was build a kick-ass robot and hopefully beat the other robots that were against us. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but you know, I felt like actually during that period and doing that for several months, I definitely felt like I was respected more and more included.
Yeah, awesome. Now, it can be really easy to feel like creating inclusion is this big, audacious goal, when in fact, I think that the way to do it is actually just to embed the idea of including others in the little practices that you do every day. And I know, Scott, this is something that you care a lot about. So can you talk a little bit about what that might look like in terms of a responsibility that you have as a leader?
As CEO, I guess I'm responsible for all of diversity and making sure that's a big part of what we do. The practice I really try to do is just get people's voices heard, because what I've found is when people don't feel included, we don't get the best out of them. And you probably all sit in meetings where there's some people that dominate the room. We have that at Atlassian. You know who you are if you're in the room. There's some people that do a lot of the talking, and there's other people that have equally good ideas, and we don't manage to tap into them. And so I feel one of my special skills is making sure that that person in the corner who probably knows more about that topic than the people doing the talking gets called upon to answer the question. So I feel that's an easy one to do.
Yeah. And Shibi, you've talked about the fact that you manage a team that's very diverse. They're on different continents, so they have different cultural identities and ways of working. And so how do you manage inclusively?
Yeah, I mean, before that, I just wanted to share one of the instances where I really felt included. So this is closest to my heart because this is my own personal story. So this happened 7 years back when I was in India, and just 2 months after our marriage, my husband told me that he got an amazing opportunity to lead an initiative that requires him to work from Germany for a few years. So definitely that sounded pretty exciting opportunity to me. So I told him, just grab it. I mean, you don't need to think about it. So, but he being a supportive husband, he asked me, what about you? What about your career? So I told you I have got a really good husband, supportive husband. So then he asked me, so would you be able to get a relocation? Or so I wasn't optimistic because first we did not have any location offices in that location. Plus I was apprehensive that me asking for working from home might reflect on my performance or my career negatively. So that was an apprehension which was holding me back. But my husband, he was constantly pushing me, and he prepared me to have that conversation with my supervisor, who's my reporting manager. I actually did that conversation, that connect with my line manager. And I still remember that conversation wherein he was trying to give me all sort of reasons how this will not work for me and how it will impact my career or my personal life. And he, in fact, told me that you should probably think of sacrificing being a woman. That's something you should do. So I was really taken aback, and I was like frustrated, confused, annoyed, and I had decided to kind of quit because I felt that I'm doing so much for this organization, and this is the only thing which I asked for, and I'm not getting at. I went back to my husband. I said, forget it, it's not going to work. So, but he was not ready for me to quit or take a break. So he told me that, why don't you talk to your on-site manager? How are they coping with this? I mean, because they being in Germany and your team is in India, so how's that happening? So I went ahead, I had that conversation with my on-site manager, and to my surprise, that conversation was like totally different. My on-site manager, he was giving me, we were discussing all the things that will make my working from Germany possible. He told me, which actually touched my heart, he said that, you have done so much for our organization, our team. I don't want you to leave just like that. I want to do whatever it takes to make your work from Germany possible. So I felt really connected, included, and empowered, and all sort of, positive adjectives that I can use. He, along with 3 other leads, they came together and they not only convinced my line manager, but convinced our organization, because we never had a work from home policy. So only for me that special arrangement was made and I could work from Germany. So that's one thing, but it doesn't finish us there. 6 years back, again, one of my team member in India, she was facing similar challenges. She had to be with her husband and kids who was moving to US on deputation on some assignment. So that was my time to return the act of kindness. And she's now working with us in my team, in fact. She's working from home, from US. So in fact, the 2 out of those 4 leads who acted as my allies are present very much here in this hall. And one of them is Armin Mayhofer, and second is Eric Gottesman. Guys, can you wave so that people can see you? Yeah. And if you allow me, I believe they really need a round of applause, because they have really done something. It really, it matters to me a lot, what you guys have done, and we need more and more allies like them. So, round of applause for you guys. Thank you.
That's amazing. And so there's a really interesting thing, which is when you don't have a very diverse team, inclusion actually isn't that hard, right? Because people have similar preferences. So a really important part of why inclusion is important is actually seeking out diversity. And I know, Scott, you do a lot of hiring because we're growing really quickly. So talk to me about, we're constantly talking about inclusion and diversity internally at Atlassian, and how has that affected the way that you think about who you bring onto the team?
First, the way I think about it is it's a numbers game. If you don't have a diverse pool of candidates at the very top of the funnel, it's very hard to then say, okay, well, 4 or 5 levels down, how do I end up with a diverse group of people to choose from? So it starts at the very top. I'm proud, actually. We have was it 57%, I think, of our grads? Yeah. Our grad intake program were female, were women out of university, and who would have thought we could do that? And it just started with a lot of work. But recently, actually, I'm hiring quite a senior role and it's not in engineering, but it's in an area that is largely dominated by guys. And it's actually quite hard to find them, so I've only managed to find 1 woman and I think about 3 or 4 men that I'm interviewing. And just for me, the diversity thing is always in my head, thinking, how do I do this better? And I'm sure I've got a lot of mistakes that I make every day. But going through this interview process, I do a standard interview for all my phone screens. It's the same for every person, for every role. I ask people what's their goal, their career goals. What are you good at professionally? What are you bad at professionally or just not interested in doing? And then who are your last 5 bosses? What would they rate you and why? And so there's no questions. It's not about how well I get along with that person. It's a standard, set of questions. And the first woman I interviewed, she talked about her boss and what she's good at, and And all the men I'd interviewed had, a list of things they were great at as long as you ram, and you really had to drag out of them what they're bad at. I don't let people get off the hook. I'll just keep asking until they give me an answer. But she would give me a couple of things she was good at, and then went on for ages about all the things she could improve on potentially. And she'd worked for the same boss for 6 years, who'd taken her, as he got promoted, dragged her along with him in every change, and so obviously had been doing a great job for him. And I asked her, well, what would he rate you out of 10? And she said 7. It's like, well, hang on, why? This person's obviously invested in you, you must be doing a great job, why is it a 7? And she said, well, 10 just doesn't exist. That's just a number, like I've never seen a 10, that's just a fairy tale. I've seen 2 or 3 9s in my life, that I probably wouldn't rate myself a 9. So on a really, really good day, I'm probably an 8, but most of the time I'm a 7. And firstly, I appreciated the honesty, because most people say I'm a 10, and then you find out when you actually call the reference check that it's not quite as rosy. But 2 is that I'm glad I asked why people rate themselves something, because everyone has their different objective, sort of the way they rate it, so asking why was important. And the last one on that is that I didn't click with her as well as I'd clicked with other people. But yet, on paper, she was just as qualified as everyone else. And I thought, hang on, this is where diversity comes in, right? I actually want a team staffed with people that don't think like I do, look like I do, have the same experiences that I do. And so, whereas normally I probably would have gone, hang on, I didn't click with that person, no, I'll find somewhere else. I'm now thinking, no, she's amazing, I've got to work out what it is. Is that the sort of diversity that's going to work for Atlassian? And is she the right candidate or not? But just having that in my head, I think, made a difference to the way I interview.
Yeah, and we've talked so much about hiring and done so much work there, but I don't really believe in rules, and even though I'm the moderator, I know you had a question for me.
Well, I was going to put Aubrey on the spot, and I was going to say, what's the thing you think Atlassian... So we hired Aubrey, how many years? 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
Wow, okay, that happened quickly. So we hired Aubrey a few years ago because we felt that every job in the company has some person in charge of it. And you could say diversity is everyone's job. You could also say marketing is everyone's job. Brand, at the end of the day, you want something to happen. You find someone that's amazing, and you say, go do it. And so we found Aubrey and said, go help us be better at diversity. And so I asked, what are the things that over the last 2 years you think we've got better at Atlassian? I guess the implication we sucked at when you walked in the door. But what are the things that you think we've improved on? I think it might be interesting because other people going through the same journey.
Yeah, so I worked in diversity and inclusion before I came to Atlassian, but weirdly, I have been the first person in my job every time that I've done it. So when I came to Atlassian, I am going to answer your question, because there's a small number of people who actually get recruited for these jobs. And I was looking at a bunch of companies, and when I started learning about Atlassian, and I really connected with the values, because for me, when I wanted to take a role that was focused on inclusion, I wanted to make sure that it was a place where people were doing it for the right reasons, and they believed it, and it was a part of it. And so when I saw the values, I said, oh, they're totally into diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, stop telling all the good things. What are the things we
I'm
sucked
gonna
at?
tell
Come
you
on,
what
get
we're
there.
bad at. But for me, I was like, oh, they're values. I just need to focus them. Like, they're focused over here. And so when I got in, I think one of the biggest things is that there were still a lot of really standard misconceptions about why diversity didn't exist. So there's the tech industry is a meritocracy, right? And I had that discussion probably 50 times in my first 6 months at Atlassian, and I scienced that to death. And because, right, there's no empirical evidence that that's true, like most systems in the world. Or a lot of times I actually got, and it's connected to this, when I'd come in and folks would ask, well, how do we increase diversity? I don't want to lower the bar, because they thought what we were going to do was start taking things like gender and race into account. And I answered those questions a ton because no one had had the opportunity to learn from them. And I don't really answer those questions very much anymore, because we've actually had open dialogue and answered those questions seriously. But the thing that honestly makes me the most proud is I always talked about, I was like, the goal is for me to just get fired because there's nothing left for me to do. And I've been here 2 years. Yeah, I was just saying it feels like 3 months or something. But when I started, I was driving so much education and so much content. And now it's a weekly occurrence that I find out about inclusion projects that I didn't even know about. So like I get a ping from the experience team in our Amsterdam office where they've set up a prayer room, or when we did our rebranding of ADG3, right, this enormous cross-company project, and the marketing team pulls me in to do a diversity consult, and they're like, what do you think about the diversity of the people that we've designed? And I'm like, I have absolutely no comments for you. You know, they expanded the range of skin tones and showed, you know, Muslim customers and Sikh customers and all of those things. And so I think we've switched from me sort of pushing it and pushing the education to not just people taking ownership of it, but people taking initiative to do things I haven't even thought of. So that's really great for me. Like, I get up in the morning and I'm like, yes, I get to go to work and I get to do that. So that for me is really special. And I think the reason, honestly, that we've been able to do that is because we already had a team of people who were deeply caring, and they just didn't know quite what allyship was. And you give them the language, and you give them a little direction, and then they go build amazing things for other people. So, and I'm really sappy about it, totally. You can ask anyone, I love my job. But now, I really like to focus on actionable things, because like I said, allyship can feel really like scary, and Dom Price, our head of R&D, he always says, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so I'd love to hear from you all, what's one tip or one strategy or one thing that everyone in the audience can do tomorrow that would make their team just a little bit more inclusive?
Sure, I'll start. So if I could summarize everything in one sentence, I would say start now and remember that it's diversity and inclusion. It's not just about getting diverse people in the door, but what are you doing to keep them there? What are you doing to help them feel included? What are you doing to attract even more diverse teams? As someone working from a very culturally diverse office in Amsterdam, it's easy for people to say, well, we already have all of these nationalities represented. We're doing everything right. And that's not always the case. It's about making people feel comfortable, and that starts before the hiring process even. I would say don't wait until you have a space to fill and say, oh, not on purpose, but you don't want it to become a situation where it seems like you're filling spaces or trying to meet a quota for certain demographics. What are you doing now? What are you doing from this moment to make people feel that they want to work for you, they want to work with you, that your company or your small business or your one freelancing company makes them feel like they're part of your team, makes them feel like their voice is heard and that they're included in your thought process.
Awesome.
So I think for me, I would definitely surround myself with investors, people that believe in me, believe in my ability. And yeah, so I think that's just one thing I definitely encourage people to do.
I'm just going to say the standardized interviews, I think, is a really big one, not only for diversity, but actually just for your business in general. You'll hire great people regardless of gender or race or anything like that by using standardized interviews.
Okay, so I'll say if each one of us can pledge to sponsor at least one diverse person to advance to next level, collectively we can have a multiplier effect on creating a pipeline of extraordinary talent at each level of the business. So I would encourage everyone to identify that one diverse person. It can be from your family, or it can be from your team, or from your society. Just identify that one person and just sponsor them, support them to move to a next level. And yeah, so I'll say let's come together and change the equation for diversity.
Yeah. And since I coach people on this all day, I think the simplest way that I tell people to be more inclusive is just to always ask yourself one question or two questions, which is, who am I leaving out? And what perspective don't I have? Because it turns out if you're seeking out that perspective, it's on you to create the space where someone feels free to bring it. And that's really easy. It can be whether you're going out for lunch with your team, or it can be when you're designing a new program. Or designing a new product for your users. Who am I leaving out? What perspective don't I have? So that's what we have for you. But thank you so much for joining us. And round of applause for our amazing panelists.